The night the sky broke open, it wasn't with thunder or lightning, but with silence. Deep in the wilds of southern Argentina, far from city lights and cell towers, a woman stood barefoot on the wooden porch of her small home, watching her 2 children chase fireflies near the edge of the forest. The air smelled of damp earth and eucalyptus. It had been a quiet week, just the 3 of them, books, stargazing, and warm soup at dusk. She liked it that way. After years working in crowded labs and noisy conferences, this peace felt like healing. Her kids were different, not in a strange way, but in a way people didn't quite understand. They could tell when a storm was coming hours before the clouds rolled in. Sometimes they'd wake up crying during solar flares, even though the sky looked perfectly calm. Doctors called it heightened sensory perception. She just called it her children being deeply tuned into the world around them. That night, the auroras were unusually bright green ribbons dancing far farther north than they should. Scientists around the world were buzzing about a massive solar storm hitting Earth's magnetosphere. But out here, there were no alerts, no sirens, just stars. And then, suddenly, none. The lights went out not just in the house, but across the whole valley. Not a single bulb flickered. Even the crickets stopped singing. The twins froze mid-laugh, their eyes wide, staring upward. And then it appeared. Not a plane. Not a drone. Something smooth, dark, and utterly silent, hovering just above the treetops. It didn't hum. It didn't glow. It simply was, like a hole cut into the night itself. Before she could shout, before she could run, twin beams of soft blue light shot down and wrapped gently but firmly around her children. They didn't scream. They didn't struggle. They just looked back at her, confused, as if asking, "Is this okay?" She sprinted toward them, heart hammering, screaming their names, but her voice vanished into the thick air, muffled like cotton stuffed in her ears. The ground trembled slightly. The craft rose, slow and steady, carrying her children upward without a sound. Within seconds, it was gone, swallowed by the stars. She collapsed to her knees, breath ragged, hands clawing at the dirt where they'd stood moments before. For hours, she searched. She called every number she could think of: local police, emergency services, even old colleagues at space agencies. Most thought she was hysterical. A few listened. One satellite operator in Chile later confirmed something unidentifiable had passed through low Earth orbit that night, moving faster than anything human-made, leaving no heat signature, no radio trail, nothing but a brief distortion in the magnetic field. 3 days passed. Then a week. No ransom note. No message. Just silence. Then, on the 10th morning, every major news network interrupted programming at once. A signal clear, structured, and unmistakably artificial had been received by deep space listening stations in Australia, Germany, and Puerto Rico. It wasn't random noise. It was a message, translated slowly by teams of linguists and AI specialists. It carried a formal declaration from a group calling themselves the Galactic Council, a coalition of civilizations monitoring emerging intelligent species. According to them, Earth had entered a critical observation phase. And her children? They'd been taken because their neural patterns resonated with cosmic energy frequencies deemed unstable and potentially disruptive to interstellar harmony. The world erupted. Some called it a hoax. Others wept in awe. Governments scrambled to respond. Conspiracy theorists claimed it was a military experiment gone wrong. But for her, none of that mattered. All that mattered was that something had taken her babies and called it policy. She hadn't slept in days. Her hand shook constantly. But beneath the grief, something else stirred. A cold, steady anger. Not the kind that explodes, but the kind that sharpens. The kind that plans. She combed through every scrap of data. She reached out to astrophysicists, neurologists, even poets who studied ancient myths about sky beings. She learned that her children's brainwaves, recorded during one of their episodes, matched harmonic patterns found in pulsar emissions, natural rhythmic signals from dying stars. There was nothing dangerous about it. Only beauty. Only connection. Yet the Galactic Council saw a threat where there was wonder. One evening, sitting alone in her dim kitchen, she turned on a small webcam, just a cheap one from a drawer, and began to speak. No script, no filter. Just a mother, raw and exhausted, looking straight into the lens. You took them like they were objects, she said, voice trembling but clear. Like they weren't loved. Like they didn't matter. But they do. To me, to billions of people who've never met them, they matter. And if you think humanity will sit quietly while you decide which of our children are safe, you don't know us at all. She uploaded the video and walked away, not expecting much thought by morning. It had been shared over 2 million times. People weren't just watching, they were feeling. Parents held their kids tighter. Scientists demanded transparency. Street artists painted murals of 2 small silhouettes reaching for the stars. In Cairo, Tokyo, Rio, strangers lit candles in solidarity. The world had spent decades fearing alien invasion. But now, faced with actual contact, what rose wasn't fear, it was fury. Not the violent kind, the protective kind. The kind that says, you don't get to take what's ours. And at the center of it all stood one woman, no uniform, no title, no army, just a mother who refused to be erased. The Galactic Council had expected silence, compliance, maybe curiosity. They never expected her, and they certainly never expected what came next. Not weapons, not warships, but unity. A planet, long divided, beginning to speak with one voice. But that was only the beginning. After the video went viral, everything changed, but not in the way anyone expected. She didn't become a celebrity. She didn't give interviews on flashy talk shows or pose for magazine covers. Instead, she disappeared into a small room at the back of a university lab, surrounded by whiteboards covered in equations, star charts, and scribbled notes about brainwave frequencies. Her hair was often tied back in a messy knot, her clothes rumpled from days without sleep. But her eyes, those never looked tired. They burned with something quiet and unshakable. People kept sending messages. Thousands every hour. Some offered help. Some begged for answers. A few accused her of making it all up for attention. She read them all. She answered none. Not because she didn't care, but because words weren't enough anymore. She needed action. Then came the knock on the door. Not from reporters. Not from conspiracy hunters. From a retired radio astronomer who'd spent 40 years listening to the sky, hoping to hear a whisper from beyond. He brought data, real, hard numbers from a dish in the Atacama Desert. Buried in the static after the abduction, there was a repeating pattern. Not random. Not natural. Not natural. A signature. Like a fingerprint left behind by the ship. She stared at the graph until her vision blurred. Then she called 3 more scientists, one in Oslo, one in Nairobi, one in Jakarta, people she'd only ever known through academic papers. Within 48 hours, they were on a secure video call, sharing findings, cross-referencing signals, piecing together what the Galactic Council had said versus what their own instruments recorded. And here's what they found. The twins' brain activity during high solar activity didn't disrupt cosmic fields. It synchronized with them. Like tuning forks. Like echoes answering each other across space. There was no threat. Only resonance. Only connection. That night, she sat down again in front of the webcam. This time, she wasn't crying. She was calm, focused, "You took my children because you were afraid," she said, voice steady. "But fear makes you blind. What you saw as danger was just life, human life reaching out, even if we didn't know we were doing it. My kids don't control stars. They feel them. And that's not a weapon. That's a gift." She uploaded the clip with raw data attached, open source, free for anyone to check. Within hours, universities, amateur astronomers, even high school science clubs began running their own analyses. Independent teams confirmed it. The so-called unstable resonance was a natural harmonic match between human neural patterns and certain cosmic rhythms. It had probably existed for thousands of years, maybe longer. The story shifted. Now, it wasn't just about missing children. It was about misunderstanding, about arrogance, about a council of distant beings making judgments without ever asking a single human parent, "What are you trying to protect?" Governments, usually slow and cautious, started moving faster than ever before. Emergency meetings were called at the United Nations. For the first time in history, rival nations agreed on something instantly. Earth's children were not bargaining chips, not experiments, not anomalies to be contained. One evening, a quiet message arrived, not through official channels, but through an old encrypted network used by deep space researchers. It was short. "Not all among us agree with the decision." No name, no origin, just those words. She read it over and over. Hope flickered, but she didn't trust it yet. Hope could break you if you leaned on it too soon. Instead, she did something unexpected. She stopped talking about aliens. She started talking about us. In a live broadcast watched by millions, she stood not as a victim, but as a witness. "This isn't just about my family," she said. "It's about who we are as a species. When someone takes a child, do we hide? Do we negotiate quietly while pretending it's normal? Or do we stand up and say, 'No, not here. Not like this'?" Her words hit like a wave. Protests didn't turn violent, they turned determined. People held vigils, not with anger, but with lanterns shaped like constellations. Musicians composed songs using actual recordings of pulsar signals mixed with children's laughter. Artists projected images of the twins onto government buildings, not as victims, but as symbols of something fragile and precious that humanity would now defend together. And then came the turning point. A major space agency, normally tight-lipped, released a statement. They were activating a global network of deep space communication arrays. Not to send threats, but to send a message. A simple one: return them. We are watching. We are united. Behind the scenes, she worked tirelessly. She met with diplomats, engineers, even poets, because sometimes truth needs beauty to be heard. She insisted that any human response must carry empathy, not ego. "We're not trying to scare them," she told a room full of generals and scientists. "We're trying to make them see us as parents, as people who love fiercely." Slowly, the world stopped acting like separate countries and started acting like one home. And somewhere, far beyond the moon, maybe someone was listening not just to our signals, but to our hearts. She didn't know if it would work. But for the first time since that silent night in Patagonia, she allowed herself to believe it might. Because fury alone doesn't win battles. But fury guided by love? That changes worlds. The world didn't just talk. It got to work. In garages, university labs, and community centers across the planet, people began building. Not weapons, not threats, bridges. A retired engineer in a small coastal town spent 3 sleepless nights rewiring an old satellite dish in his backyard, his hands steady despite the tremor in his voice. "If my signal can help bring those kids home," he told his neighbor, "then every bolt matters." Across oceans, students gathered in libraries, translating the mother's words into gentle pulses of light, rhythmic sound patterns. Even the soft vibration of a humming tuning fork, anything that might carry feeling beyond language, thought no one was turned away. A fisherman in Southeast Asia offered his boat's radio equipment. A grandmother in Eastern Europe knitted 2 tiny blankets, stitching constellations into the wool with silver thread. "For when they're cold," she whispered, mailing them to the coordination center with no return address. Strangers sent drawings from their children, crayon stars, stick figure families holding hands, messages that read "We miss you" in a dozen languages. These weren't just gestures. They were threads, weaving a net of care strong enough to reach the stars. Then came the whisper from the dark. A faint signal, barely detectable, arrived through a quiet research station tucked in a mountain valley. It wasn't official. It felt personal. After days of careful decoding by a team of linguists and physicists working side by side with poets, the meaning emerged. Not all agree. The taking broke our oldest promise. Attached was a simple symbol, 2 hands cradling a single glowing light. No signature. No demands. Just truth. When the mother saw it, she didn't cheer. She sat quietly for a long time, tears tracing slow paths down her cheeks. "They have families too," she murmured to the small group around her. "Someone there is a parent. Someone remembers what it feels like." That changed everything. This wasn't about winning. It was about reminding. She spent the next afternoon writing. Not on a computer. On paper. Her handwriting was slightly shaky, the ink smudged in one corner where a tear had fallen. She wrote about ordinary things. How her daughter hummed while drawing pictures of the moon. How her son always saved the last bite of his favorite fruit for her. How they'd lie on the grass together, naming clouds. "These aren't weapons," she wrote. "These are children. And if you've ever held a child while they slept, you know this." That evening, she stood before a single microphone in a quiet room. No makeup, no script. Just her voice, warm and clear as morning light. "We are not your test subjects," she began, her words carried live to every corner of Earth. "We are parents. We are teachers. We are neighbors who share bread and worry. We protect our young not out of fear, but because love is our oldest language. If your child were taken, would you stay silent? Or would you move every mountain, light every candle, send every prayer into the dark until they were safe? We are doing the same. And we hope, we truly hope, you understand." As she spoke, something beautiful unfolded across the planet. In Tokyo, a choir of schoolchildren sang a lullaby their grandparents taught them. In Nairobi, drummers beat a steady, heartbeat rhythm. In Rio, families placed lanterns in windows. In Reykjavik, a violinist played a single, clear note that echoed through a silent square. All of it, every song, every light, every heartbeat, was woven into the message. Scientists called it multi-sensory transmission, but people just called it sending love. Engineers linked telescopes from desert plains to snowy peaks. Farmers pointed old radio antennas toward the sky. Teenagers in internet cafes fine-tuned signals with trembling hands. There were no borders that night. No, us versus them. Just one planet, breathing together, reaching upward with open palms. After the final transmission pulsed into the cosmos, a gentle wave of sound. Light and human feeling, the mother stepped outside. The night air was cool. Above her, the stars glittered, unchanged yet somehow new. A young technician approached, eyes red-rimmed but smiling. "It's gone," he said softly. "Every piece of it. Carried on the solar wind." She nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt tender, like the whole world had just held its breath together. Later, watching footage of strangers hugging in city squares, of elders wiping tears while holding children close, she realized something. They hadn't just sent a message out. They had healed something within. Old wounds between nations softened. Arguments faded. For the first time, people saw themselves not as citizens of separate places, but as one family under the same sky. She looked up at the stars again, not with anger, but with quiet courage. Hear us, she thought, not as a threat, but as a reminder. And somewhere in the vast, silent dark, a message made of lullabies, heartbeat rhythms, and a mother's unwavering love began its journey home. The reply came on a Tuesday, not with sirens or panic, but a single line of text glowing softly on a shared global channel. We will listen. Come to the quiet place between worlds. No demands. No threats. Just an invitation. She didn't hesitate. While world leaders debated protocols and safety, she packed a small cloth bag. Inside, a crayon drawing of 3 stick figures under a lopsided sun, a tiny audio chip holding 30 seconds of bedtime giggles, a smooth river stone her daughter always kept in her pocket. Ordinary things. Human things. The journey upward felt like floating in a dream. No roaring engines, just a gentle hum, then silence. Weightlessness. Pressing her forehead to the cool window, she watched Earth shrink. No borders, no divisions. Just one fragile, breathing home. Tears drifted from her eyes like tiny pearls. Hold on, she whispered into the void. Mama's coming. At the meeting place, a soft, pearlescent sphere hanging in the star-dusted dark. She stepped through a ripple of light. The air smelled like rain on warm stone. And there they were, not monsters, not cold judges, beings of gentle light and flowing forms. One stood apart, a presence whose skin shimmered like sunlight on deep water, patterns shifting slowly like tides. Its eyes held a quiet sorrow she recognized instantly. A parent, she thought. I know that look. A soft chime filled the space. Speak. She didn't reach for science. She reached for truth. This is my son's drawing, she said, holding up the crayon art. He said the yellow circle was the sun, and also a cookie. He always shared his cookies. A faint ripple of light passed through the tall being nearby. Then she played the sound. Just 30 seconds. 2 children laughing over spilled milk, breathless and joyful. The small being with gentle eyes let out a soft, chiming sigh. She spoke of ordinary moments. How her daughter hummed to calm storms in her own heart. How her son saved ladybugs from puddles. Their connection to the stars isn't danger, she said, voice trembling but clear. It's tenderness. It's the same feeling you get watching your child sleep. You took them because you were afraid. But fear closes doors. Love opens them. She turned slowly, meeting each presence. Then she looked straight at the one who shimmered like the sea. If your child were taken, she whispered, not with malice, but with misunderstanding, would you wait for permission to bring them home? Or would you move every star in the sky to hold them again? Silence. Then a single luminous tear traced a path down the water-light being's cheek. It raised a hand. In the air between them, an image formed. 2 small children sleeping peacefully under a blanket woven with starlight. Safe, unharmed. Beside them, a tiny glowing handprint, the mark of a promise. A gentle hum filled the room. Not words. A sound of recognition. Of shared ache. The tall being bowed its head. The small one chimed softly. Something had shifted, not with force, but with feeling. As she turned to leave, the waterlight being extended a hand. Not to touch, just to offer. And in that gesture, she felt it. Understanding. Connection. The first thread of a bridge built not from metal, but from mercy. Back in the craft. Earth glowing ahead like a promise, she closed her eyes. The fury that had carried her for months had softened into something deeper, steadier. Hope. Then, A blink of green light on the console. A signal. Mission control. But beneath it, another pulse faint. Rhythmic. Heartbeat. Someone on Earth had sensed a global broadcast to the craft's return path. Millions of people, holding hands in parks and plazas, sending one steady rhythm into the night. We're here. We're with you. She placed a palm against the window, as if touching that shared pulse. Down there, a fisherman in a coastal village lit a lantern. A teacher in a mountain town held her students close. A grandmother in a quiet apartment whispered a prayer. Not for victory. For homecoming. As the craft dipped into the atmosphere, city lights bloomed below, not in celebration, but in welcome. Soft glows in windows. Candles on sidewalks. A silent chorus of care stretching across continents. She didn't smile yet. The children weren't in her arms. But for the first time since that silent night in Patagonia, she let herself breathe, because she had gone not as a soldier, but as a mother. She had spoken not with data, but with love, and somewhere in the vast dark, a heart had listened. The real work wasn't over, but the door was open. And love had turned the key. The morning air smelled of wet grass and blooming jasmine. A soft breeze rustled the leaves as a small craft, no larger than a delivery van, settled silently on the dewy field behind the old stone house. No flashing lights. No crowds. Just 3 figures stepping onto familiar soil. The children moved slowly, blinking in the gentle sunlight. They wore simple clothes woven with threads that caught the light like morning dew. In the girl's arms, a small, smooth stone pulsed with a soft, warm glow. The boy clutched a folded drawing, 2 stick figures holding hands beneath a starry sky, with tiny hearts drawn around them. Then she saw them. She didn't run. She simply opened her arms. And they came. Not with shouts, but with quiet steps. The girl buried her face in her mother's shoulder, breathing in the scent of home soap, wood smoke, love. The boy pressed his forehead against her chest, listening to the steady, familiar beat of her heart. No words were needed. Tears fell freely hers, theirs. The few quiet witnesses nearby wiping their own eyes. A grandmother from the next village stood holding a basket of warm bread, her wrinkled hands trembling. A young farmer leaned against the fence, hat in hand, whispering, "Welcome home." Inside the house, sunlight streamed through the kitchen window. Honey cakes sat on a chipped blue plate. Warm milk steamed in mismatched mugs. The children ate slowly, their voices soft as they shared small things. How the gentle beings sang lullabies that felt like starlight. How they showed them pictures of Earth from afar. They called it the Blue Heart, the girl said, eyes wide. They were sad they scared us. There was no anger in her voice. Only understanding. Only kindness. News spread quietly. Not with headlines, but with heartbeats. In a Tokyo apartment, a father held his sleeping daughter a little longer. In a Nairobi market, vendors shared extra fruit with strangers, saying, "Today, we celebrate coming home." In a Reykjavik classroom, children drew pictures of 2 small figures under a shared sun and mailed them in a single envelope marked for the twins. No politics. No speeches. Just people remembering what it means to care. Weeks later, under the same Patagonian stars where it all began, a simple ceremony unfolded. People came not as nations, but as neighbors. They brought seeds to plant, songs to share, stories to weave together. An elder from the local community placed a hand-woven bracelet around the girl's wrist. "This means you belong," she said softly. The boy received a tiny wooden bird carved by a craftsman who'd lost his own child long ago. "So you always remember someone made this with love," he whispered. From this quiet gathering grew the cradle accord, not a treaty of power, but a promise written in plain words. We protect the young. We listen before we judge. We reach with open hands. Schools began teaching children to look at the stars, not with fear, but with curiosity. Artists painted murals of hands, human and otherwise, holding a single glowing light. Musicians blended children's laughter with the gentle chimes described by the twins, sending the melody softly into the night sky each year on the anniversary of their return. Years passed. The children grew. Sometimes on clear nights, they'd sit with their mother on the porch, pointing at the stars. "Do you think they remember us?" the boy once asked. His mother smiled, squeezing his hand. "I think they remember how love sounds," she said. "And so do we." One evening, a new signal arrived, not urgent, not demanding. Just a single, soft chime, followed by the image of two small hands releasing a paper boat into a starlit river. Attached, 3 words translated simply, "We are learning." No one cheered. No one panicked. People simply looked at each other, smiled, and went back to their lives, holding doors a little longer, hugging their children a little tighter, pausing to watch the sunset with gratitude. Because the real victory wasn't in the stars. It was here, in the shared meal between strangers, in the teacher who told her class, "Kindness is our strongest language," in the quiet courage of a mother who chose love over fear, and in the millions who chose to walk beside her. The universe hadn't changed, but humanity had. And sometimes that's enough to light up the dark.